Jordan walked into the banquet hall with steady steps, his shoulders back, his face calm. The chandeliers above glowed with golden light, bouncing off crystal glasses and polished silver. Laughter filled the air, the kind that seemed warm but carried sharp edges if you listened closely. The hall was alive with chatter, clinking glasses, and the quiet hum of expensive music playing in the background. He paused for a moment, taking it all in. Family members he hadn't seen in months gathered around long tables covered in silk cloth, waiters in white gloves carrying trays of wine. His cousins were already in little groups, laughing loudly as though their stories were the most important thing in the room. His aunts, dressed in glittering gowns, exchanged compliments with tight smiles. As Jordan approached, conversations dipped for a moment. Eyes flickered to him, measuring, judging, and then flicked away, as if he were nothing more than a small detail in the decor. A few cousins nodded politely. Others simply turned back to their laughter. "Jordan," his older brother Marcus said, appearing suddenly with a smirk. "Glad you made it. We weren't sure if you'd actually show up this time." His voice carried just enough sarcasm to earn chuckles from the people nearby. Jordan forced a polite smile. "Of course I'd show up. It's family." "Family," Marcus repeated, with a laugh that felt more like a knife. "Right." The room seemed to buzz with invisible whispers. Jordan could almost feel the weight of old labels being placed on him again. The quiet one, the underachiever, the one who never quite measured up. He walked to the table where seating was being arranged. Name cards with careful calligraphy marked each chair. He searched for his, but before he could find it, one of his aunts chuckled, holding up a card. "Oh Jordan, here's your spot. Looks like they've saved you a seat." She waved him over toward the far side of the hall, where a small round table was tucked away. At first, Jordan thought it was a mistake, but then he saw who was already seated there. Children. His nieces and nephews, dressed in tiny suits and dresses, giggled as they swung their legs under the table. A silence fell for a split second, and then the laughter started. Soft chuckles from one side of the room, then louder laughs from another. Even Marcus grinned wide. "Well, that seems about right, doesn't it?" Jordan finally found his crowd. Whispers rippled across the hall, some people shaking their heads, others covering their smiles with napkins. Heat rose in Jordan's chest. His hands curled slightly at his sides, though his face stayed calm. Every eye on him felt like a spotlight, pressing down. He walked toward the table, his movements slow, each step echoing louder in his mind than the music or laughter. The children looked up at him curiously. One of his nieces, barely 8 years old, tilted her head. "Uncle Jordan," she said softly, "why are you sitting here? You're not a kid." The words stung more than the laughter. Jordan pulled out the small chair, sat down, and forced another smile, though inside, his chest burned with humiliation. All around, glasses clinked again. The laughter returned to its rhythm. But for Jordan, the noise of the banquet blurred into a low hum. The humiliation sat heavy on his shoulders, pressing into him with every whisper, every chuckle, every dismissive glance. And yet, beneath the sting, something hardened quietly inside him. They thought he was small. They thought he was nothing. They had no idea. Jordan grew up in a fractured family where success was always measured loudly, through titles, possessions, and appearances. In his home, silence was weakness. If you didn't announce your wins, they believed you had none. His cousins bragged about vacations, his uncles about promotions, his siblings about bonuses and cars. Every family gathering turned into a competition of who could shine brighter, who could be the loudest about their success. Jordan was different. He didn't talk much, and when he achieved something, he kept it close. He didn't see the point of shouting. But in a family like his, that silence became a label. He was the underachiever, the one who never quite kept up. He remembered being a teenager, sitting at the dinner table as Marcus, his older brother, showed off his acceptance letter to a top university. The family cheered, clapped, and called him brilliant. When Jordan quietly shared that he had won a small regional coding competition, Marcus laughed. "That's cute, Jordan. But it's not exactly Harvard, is it?" The table roared with laughter. Jordan smiled then, but it stung deeply. That memory was only one of many. At birthdays, cousins teased him for not driving a new car. At weddings, aunts asked, "So what are you doing these days?" with a tone that carried more judgment than curiosity. Even when he achieved, Marcus would twist it into something small. "Oh, Jordan? He's just figuring things out. Nothing serious yet." Years passed, but the pattern never changed. Jordan learned to stop explaining himself. If they wanted to believe he was nothing, let them. What they never noticed was how hard he worked in silence. Jordan built a small tech company from his own apartment. Nights blurred into mornings, and his only companions were glowing screens and cups of coffee. He wasn't flashy, but he was clever, patient, and determined. Slowly his company grew. First a handful of clients, then dozens, then hundreds. Contracts came in. Profits doubled, then tripled. He bought his own home quietly, without making it a family event. He invested, expanded, and hired people who believed in his vision. By 32, Jordan had built a business worth more than most of his relatives could imagine. But to his family he was still struggling. Why? Because he didn't brag. He didn't post pictures of cars or vacations. He didn't wear branded suits or flash watches. He lived simply. And in their world, silence still meant failure. At gatherings, Marcus kept the spotlight, spinning stories about his important meetings and big deals. Aunts and cousins listened with admiration. When Jordan walked into the room, conversations dipped into pity. "He's nice, but not everyone can be successful." They never asked, never cared to look closer. This wound, being invisible, being underestimated, sat heavy in Jordan's chest for years. He carried it quietly, but it shaped him. He didn't need their approval, but part of him longed to be seen. Just once, he wanted them to recognize the man he had become, not the child they mocked. When the family banquet was planned, Jordan agreed to cover the cost. The hall, the decor, the catering, all of it. But he made one request to the manager: keep his name hidden. He wanted to watch them, to see their true colors when they thought he was just another guest. And so on that night, as laughter and glass clinking filled the room, Jordan entered knowing a secret no one else knew. The banquet they were so proud of, the one Marcus would no doubt take credit for, was built by Jordan's quiet success, but he didn't plan to reveal it right away. He wanted to see, just how deep did their disrespect run? Would they treat him the same, even when he had provided everything they were enjoying? The answer came quickly. A seat at the kids' table. Whispered jokes. The same old humiliation. The same invisibility. Jordan sat there, his face calm but his heart burning. They thought he was small, but he had built something far larger than they could ever imagine. They didn't know yet, but soon they would. Marcus stood up, glass raised high, the room quieting as everyone turned toward him. He wore that familiar grin, the one that always came before a jab. "To family," he began, voice smooth and loud enough to carry across the hall. "And to tradition. Some of us grow older, wiser, and more successful with time. Others," his eyes flicked to Jordan, sharp and mocking, "seem stuck in eternal childhood." Laughter burst around the tables. Glasses clinked, heads nodded, shoulders shook. A few cousins laughed so hard they nearly spilled their drinks. Jordan felt the sound echo inside his chest like a drum. His lips pulled into a thin smile, a shield against the heat crawling up his neck. Marcus lowered his glass, smirking. "But hey, don't worry, Jordan. We'll keep a seat for you at the big table when you finally get there." The word stung, but worse was the ripple of laughter that followed. One of his cousins leaned over with a grin and called out, "Don't worry, Jordan. Maybe one day you'll sit with the adults when you finally achieve something." The room laughed again, some trying to hide it, others openly enjoying the joke. Jordan pressed his hand flat against his thigh under the table. The kids at his table looked up at him in confusion, their innocent faces blinking at the cruelty flying above their heads. His niece whispered again, "But you are a grown-up." He wanted to disappear. He wanted to get up and walk out, but before he could move, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Jordan slipped it out quietly and glanced at the screen. Payment processed, banquet hall reservation, catering, full event services. The amount was large, enough to make most people in the room gasp if they saw it. Jordan's thumb hovered on the screen. He looked up slowly, his gaze sweeping over the glittering hall. The tall flower arrangements, the polished silver, the endless stream of waiters carrying trays. Every detail, every luxury, every smile in the room. They were here because of him. But no one knew. Marcus was soaking in the praise, standing proudly as relatives clapped for his toast. A few even thanked him for organizing such a wonderful evening, assuming, of course, that he was the one responsible. Jordan stayed silent, his phone glowing softly in his hand before he locked it and slid it back into his pocket. His heart thudded, not just with hurt, but with something else, something steadier. A decision forming in the quiet. He would not reveal it yet. Not now. But the thought of silence forever? No. Not this time. Jordan straightened in his chair, his face calm again. He let Marcus bask in false glory. He let the cousins laugh. He let the whispers fly. But deep inside something shifted. The humiliation was no longer just pain. It was fuel. For years, they had looked at him as if he were small. Tonight they would learn who he truly was. Not yet, but soon. The kids at the small round table looked at Jordan with wide eyes. They didn't understand the tension in the air, the whispers, or the laughter aimed at him. They only saw their uncle sitting in the wrong place. One of his nephews, no older than 6, tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle Jordan, why are you sitting here? This is the kids' table." Another niece frowned, tilting her head in confusion. "But you're a grown-up. You don't belong here." Their innocent words cut deeper than all the laughter from the adults. Jordan forced a smile for them, leaning closer. "Maybe I just like sitting with you," he said gently. The children giggled, accepting his answer, but inside his chest burned. Across the hall, Marcus stood tall, waving his glass as he greeted relatives. He was in his element, glowing in borrowed admiration. "Yes, it took a lot to put this together," Marcus boasted loudly. "But you know me. I wanted the family to have the best. Nothing less." Applause followed, along with murmurs of praise. "Marcus really outdid himself this time," one aunt said. "Always the responsible one. He has such a good head on his shoulders," another added. "Unlike," her eyes flicked toward Jordan at the kids' table. The words trailed off, but the meaning hung in the air like smoke. Jordan sat stiffly, jaw tight. His hand tightened around his glass, knuckles pale. Every praise Marcus collected was a knife turned against him. The truth burned inside. "I paid for all of this. Every flower, every plate, every light in this hall. Me. Not him." But he stayed silent, swallowing the pain. His eyes, though, grew harder, colder. He leaned back slightly, and that was when he overheard 2 relatives behind him whispering. "He's nice, but he'll never amount to much," one voice said. "I know," the other replied. "Poor Jordan. Always drifting. At least Marcus turned out well." The words blurred into laughter, but Jordan couldn't unhear them. He shut his eyes for a second, and suddenly he was a boy again, sitting in the corner of the living room while his siblings were praised for their trophies, their grades, their charm. He remembered Marcus smirking, patting his shoulder as their father said, "Jordan's just extra. Don't expect too much from him." Extra. The word had followed him his whole life. The forgotten sibling, the background figure. Always less. He opened his eyes again, the memory dissolving into the glittering banquet hall around him. Nothing had changed. They still saw him as that boy, the invisible one. His first instinct was to stand up and leave, to walk out and let them enjoy their shallow laughter. What did it matter if they never saw him for who he was? He didn't need their validation. But something inside stopped him. Pride maybe. Or something sharper. If he walked out, Marcus would win. They would all keep their illusions. They would keep laughing at him, secure in their false picture of who he was. No. Not tonight. So Jordan stayed seated, even though every minute stretched like an hour. He stayed as Marcus circled the room, shaking hands, clinking glasses, soaking in credit that wasn't his. Jordan sipped his drink slowly, his face calm, almost unreadable. But beneath the surface, his emotions swirled like a storm. Humiliation fought against strength. Anger battled against patience. He had never wanted revenge, not truly. But he wanted truth. He wanted them to see. As the evening went on, the laughter grew louder. The band played cheerful music. Waiters brought out courses of fine food. And through it all, Jordan sat at the children's table, watching, waiting. He noticed the way Marcus leaned into the spotlight, accepting every compliment as though he had written the checks himself. He watched aunts and uncles beam at Marcus like he was the shining star of the family. He listened to cousins whisper, their words floating back to him again and again. Jordan never did much. Jordan just blends into the background. Jordan's sweet, but he'll always be behind. Each word added fuel to the fire building quietly in his chest. Then came the announcement. The banquet was moving toward its highlight, the evening toast, where everyone would raise their glasses in gratitude to the host. Jordan's breath slowed. He knew exactly how it would go. Marcus would step forward, smile wide, and let them crown him the hero of the night. The lies would be sealed in applause. Jordan's fingers tapped against his glass, a steady rhythm. The storm inside him had found its center. He was done swallowing the pain. Done being invisible. He looked around the hall one last time. The lights glittered, the flowers shone, the food steamed on the tables. All of it stood as proof of what they didn't know. And soon, very soon they would. The hall manager approached quietly, holding a leather folder close to his chest. He leaned down by Jordan's chair, lowering his voice. "Mr. Parker," he said, using Jordan's last name with respect, "here's the final receipt for the evening. Everything has been settled." The folder slid discreetly onto the table in front of Jordan. But the words weren't quiet enough. Marcus, who was nearby shaking hands, froze. His head snapped toward them, eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" Marcus asked, his smile faltering. The manager looked confused. "I was just confirming with Mr. Parker that the final balance is paid in full. Thank you again, sir." He gave Jordan a respectful nod and stepped away. A murmur swept across the tables. Marcus's face drained of color. "What?" he stammered. "No, that's wrong. I arranged." But before he could spin the story, Jordan pushed back his chair and stood up. The room hushed at once, surprised that the quiet, invisible brother was suddenly commanding attention. Jordan walked toward the microphone at the front, his steps slow but steady. He took the mic with calm hands, his face unreadable. "Good evening," he said softly. The room stilled. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's not every day that we gather like this, share a meal, and celebrate family. Nights like these are important." Relatives smiled and nodded, some raising their glasses. Marcus stepped forward, trying to catch Jordan's eye, but Jordan continued, his voice stronger now. "And I also want to clear something up," he said. "I've heard a lot of thanks given tonight. Most of it to my brother, Marcus." He paused. The room shifted uncomfortably. "But the truth is this banquet, this hall, the food you're enjoying, it was all paid for by me." Silence. The sound hit the room like thunder. Forks paused midair. A gasp escaped from one aunt's lips. The band in the corner stopped playing. Jordan let the silence sit, heavy and undeniable. He could feel every pair of eyes on him now, not dismissing him, not ignoring him, but shocked into stillness. Marcus's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. He tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. You're lying." "He's just saying that." But the hall manager, still standing nearby, stepped forward nervously. "It's true," he said. "Mr. Parker here made every payment. Without him, this event would not be happening tonight." Another wave of whispers spread like fire through the crowd. Jordan held the mic firmly, his voice calm but heavy with years of weight. "All my life, I've been treated as the extra. The forgotten one. The one who never grew up. You've laughed at me, belittled me, called me less. Tonight, you even thought it was funny to put me at the kids' table." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the stunned faces. "And yet here we are. Every laugh you've shared tonight, every bite of food, every glass raised, it all exists because of me." A cousin shifted uncomfortably. An aunt whispered to another, eyes wide with guilt. Jordan's voice didn't rise. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The strength was in the calm. "For years, I stayed silent while you mocked me. But I'm not that child anymore. I built something. I worked harder than you ever saw. And I don't need your applause. I don't need your validation. I just need you to understand the truth." He looked directly at Marcus, whose face was now red with a mix of anger and shame. "You thought I belonged at the kids' table. But I built the table you're all eating from tonight." The words landed with the weight of a hammer. A collective gasp filled the room. Some relatives lowered their heads, ashamed. Others sat frozen, unable to meet his eyes. Marcus stumbled, trying to find words, but none came. His usual smirk, his confidence, it was gone, stripped away in front of everyone. Jordan placed the microphone back on its stand with care. He didn't need to say more. The silence of the hall spoke louder than any applause ever could. He turned and walked back toward the children's table, his steps steady, his head high. For the first time in his life, every single person in that room saw him clearly. Refuses to gloat. Jordan did not stand there waiting for applause or apologies. He didn't bask in the shocked faces around him. He didn't smirk at Marcus or demand the family acknowledge his worth. Instead, he simply set the microphone down and stood tall. His silence spoke louder than words. The room buzzed with uneasy whispers. Some relatives fumbled with their glasses. Others stared at their plates, unsure of what to say. A few tried to form quick apologies, but Jordan didn't give them the chance. He wasn't interested in pity or fake kindness. Without a word, he walked back toward the children's table, where his nieces and nephews looked at him with wide eyes. For them, this wasn't about money or pride. It was about the uncle who had stood tall when everyone else mocked him. One of the kids clapped, small hands coming together. Then another joined in. Soon, the little ones were cheering for him, calling, "Go, Uncle Jordan! You're the best!" Their voices were high and innocent, cutting through the heavy silence of the adults. For the first time that night, Jordan smiled, a real, genuine smile that softened his face. He bent slightly and gave the kids a small wave, as though to say, "Thank you. You're the only ones who saw me for me." He straightened again, but he didn't sit down. His chair remained empty. Jordan picked up his coat from the back of it and slipped it on slowly. His movements were calm, deliberate, steady. No rush, no anger, just control. As he walked toward the exit, Marcus stood frozen, his face twisted with embarrassment. All the praise he had gathered earlier had crumbled into nothing. His lies were exposed and he couldn't spin the truth anymore. No one congratulated him now. No one clapped for him. He stood there, humiliated, while Jordan walked past without even a glance. Aunts and uncles whispered. Some looked ashamed. A few avoided Jordan's eyes completely, unable to face the reality of how they had treated him. One cousin shifted uncomfortably and muttered, We were wrong about him." But Jordan didn't stop to listen. The banquet hall, which had felt so loud and glittering earlier, now seemed dim and heavy behind him. He pushed open the doors and stepped outside into the cool night air. The difference hit him instantly. The fresh quiet, the crisp wind, the freedom from their judgment. He walked across the parking lot toward his car, each step lighter than the last. When he slid into the driver's seat, he closed the door gently and rested his hands on the steering wheel. For the first time all night, he let out a long breath. Not a sigh of exhaustion, but of release. The weight that had pressed on his shoulders for years, the label of less, the constant invisibility, felt lighter now. He didn't win because he humiliated them. He won because finally they saw him. Jordan leaned back against the seat, his eyes closing for a moment. He thought of his childhood, of Marcus's smirks, of the whispers that he'd never amount to much. Tonight, all of that shattered. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't raged, he hadn't begged for recognition. He had simply spoken the truth, and the truth was powerful enough to silence them all. He started the engine, the quiet hum filling the car. Before driving away, he glanced at the banquet hall through the windshield. Inside they were still talking, still whispering, still processing. Marcus would be trying to recover his pride, but there was no recovery from what had just happened. Jordan smiled faintly, shaking his head. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about putting Marcus down. It wasn't even about proving anything to them. It was about himself, finally stepping out of the shadow they had trapped him in. As he drove out into the night, the city lights stretched before him. Freedom, dignity, peace, they were his now. Not because his family finally saw him, but because he finally chose to stop hiding. It wasn't revenge that gave him victory. It was composure. It was truth. And in that quiet drive away from the banquet, Jordan realized something simple but powerful. Being seen wasn't about the seat they gave him. It was about the life he had built when no one was looking. Jordan looks at the banquet hall one last time through the rearview mirror. The lights still glow, and people are still inside, probably whispering, probably trying to rewrite what just happened. He doesn't wait for them. He doesn't need to. With a steady breath, Jordan turns the key. The car hums to life, and he drives into the night. The road ahead is quiet, lined with streetlights and silence. For the first time all evening he feels light, free of the weight he's been carrying for years. His voice speaks inside his head, calm and certain. Respect doesn't come from the seat they give you. It comes from the life you build when nobody's watching. He thinks of the kids at the table, how their small voices cheered for him, how they looked at him with honesty, not judgment. Maybe, just maybe, they'll remember this night differently. Maybe they'll learn that worth is not decided by where you sit, but by who you are. Jordan's grip on the wheel loosens. He lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. For years, he tried to earn approval, to be seen by the same people who mocked him. Tonight, he learned he never needed their validation. The city passes by outside his window. Neon signs flicker. A group of friends laugh on the sidewalk. Life moves on, indifferent to the drama inside one banquet hall. And that's when Jordan realizes, so can he. He smiles, not the forced smile he wore at the table, but a real one. Small, quiet, but true. He doesn't plan revenge. He doesn't plan to rub his family's shame in their faces tomorrow. That's not his victory. His victory is in leaving with his dignity intact, in knowing he turned years of humiliation into a single moment of undeniable truth. The banquet hall disappears from the mirror as he drives farther. Ahead, the road opens wide, clear and endless. Jordan whispers softly, almost like a vow to himself, "I don't need their table. I'll build my own." And for the first time in his life, he feels at peace. Fade out. Hey friends, thanks for watching till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you next time.